Welcome to the MMHP in the 989, channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history. Recorded live from the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame, located inside the Bay County Historical Museum.
From the city by the bay.
Featuring Dr. J, Fred Reif, Mr. Mike, and your host, Scott Baker. Brought to you by the 989 Podcast Network and the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame, located at the Bay County Historical Society Museum at 321 Washington Avenue, Bay City, Michigan.
Hey, welcome everybody. We're podcasting again tonight from the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame, located at the Historical Museum of Bay County on Washington Avenue in beautiful downtown Bay City. And tonight we have a very special guest, Barbara Bacon. Barbara, how you doing?
I'm doing splendidly, thank you. It's exciting to be here. So I got to see the museum yesterday. It's fabulous. And come back and speak to you today. So it's just
wonderful.
Really wonderful. Thank you.
It's so great. We met really for the first time in person yesterday.
Yes.
And toured the museum, went out to dinner, saw kind of a fun concert from a Beatles tribute band in the park called Shout. They did a real nice job.
Got to sing along all
night long. A lot of fun, yeah. And again, I want to thank you so much for some of the memorabilia that you donated to the museum, and for folks that haven't visited the exhibit yet, or even those that have. We have an absolutely beautiful Stooges poster from their record release at the Grandy Ballroom in 1969, framed. And Barbara also donated 2 promotional pictures of the Scott Richard case when they were recording for A Square Records and under the management of G. Pollan, and also a great SRC poster that probably came out maybe between their second album, Milestones, and the third album, Traveler's Tale. And so great additions. And I wanted to ask you, because I didn't know this, how you found out about the museum, because we hadn't really opened yet when we first started talking, and you had sent me all these great things. So how exactly did that happen?
So I had all this memorabilia with other things in a box that my mother had sent me, and it was time to start getting rid of things. And I didn't certainly want to sell things. I wanted to donate, and it was like, how do I do this? And so this friend of mine that Gary met yesterday, we kind of looked around and got on the net and found Gary somehow. I don't even remember how necessarily, but it was very cool that it was in Michigan. Mm-hmm. So then I have to, because they're all Michigan bands, right? Even though the world knows a lot of these performers. So anyway, it was just real, and I was really pleased, because I didn't want to throw the stuff away. I've talked to too many friends that say, oh, I had that stuff and I threw it away, and so that's how that came to be.
Yeah, well, it's cool that your mother hung on to it too.
Yes, my mother,
and
God
didn't
bless
just
my
toss
mother.
it. Yeah,
my mother knew that she was a librarian, and she was a historian, in her heart. And she always said to me, we got to write a book and whatever. And so she knew that was stuff was important to me, and so she boxed it up and shipped it out to me instead of tossing it.
It's great that she did, because that would have been lost forever.
Exactly.
Right. That very rare. Those pictures and posters, very definitely.
They're very dear to my heart.
Yeah, cool.
Where did you grow up collecting all that at?
So I was born in Flint and then grew up and moved to Grand Blanc as a young child. And so it was pretty much there till I was 20-something, and then I left for California.
What years were that?
So I was born in 50, so 59, and then through the 70s, right? And it was so exciting to be kind of connected to, and we'll get into how I got into meeting these people and the groups and stuff. And but it was, I was a teenager, and what was happening but that. And so
cool.
and,
Yeah, that was
Wow.
my parents loved music, and I thought, this is kind of cool. And then, there was the whole Twiggy thing, and I wanted all of that. I just wanted to be a part of all of that. And rock and roll was where it was going to be.
When you say Twiggy thing, that's interesting. It was almost like you found inspiration through other ladies
Yes.
that was in rock and roll at the time to find your niche as a
it was-
thread through Michigan rock and roll.
It's so interesting because I think about now with the social media and all of that. And to me, in my mind, for me, I was experiencing that version of it in the 60s. It was kind of like, these people are beautiful and they're cool and they're exciting and they're, I want that. I want a taste of that. And so that's kind of what, in my mind, drove me.
well, Twiggy really.
She was very popular.
Right, and
I used to do the little black things in your eyes, just like Twiggy did.
and she kind of brought modeling into the rock and roll scene,
Absolutely.
along with Gene Shrimpton.
Oh, I love Shrimpton.
Oh man, Twiggy and Gene Shrimpton, both from England.
Right.
Yeah, really,
Oh, I adored
fantastic.
them. I had posters of them.
Oh yeah, they're
Yeah,
incredible.
In fact, I saw an interview with her later, and this was probably 20 years ago. She was like Shrimpton, and she was absolutely stunning. She was like this housemaid in England. They interviewed her, and she had a scarf over her head and no makeup, and it was like the total opposite
Wow,
of what her early life had been. It was like, wow.
that must be quite a story as to what happened there.
I know. I'd love to know how
Yes,
that involved.
definitely.
Yeah.
So
And-
you had mentioned your dad was a fan of Louis Prima
Right.
and Keely Smith, and actually Louis Prima was almost like one of the, wouldn't you say, Fred, a predecessor of rock and roll in a way.
Oh,
a lot
most
of those,
definitely.
Yeah.
I have all their records.
Yeah, it
Do
was
you?
Sam,
Oh, yeah.
Sam
I'm a big fan.
Bactera on the honking saxophone, the whole thing. Yeah.
That was rock and roll. to
Well,
me.
yeah, it really is. Although he was never billed as a rock and roll
Right.
artist.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I loved it because my dad loved it, and it was just really cool. It was old, cool stuff. But then again, like I said, my brother had the turntable, and we were talking earlier, I think, about the turntable, and it was like, I had to go into my brother's room to listen
Steal
to
records.
stuff, right? Right, and steal records. Yes, exactly. And then
So you didn't have to buy records.
No, I
you
never.
Had a brother and sister
I never,
bought the
very
records.
seldom bought records. My sister and brother had them all, and they, again, this is like so true of my family. They don't care about that stuff. Once they've experienced it, it's gone. Now I'm going to keep this because I think it has some kind of value. It has meaning to me. It has meaning to my growing up. I want to keep this stuff, right? And I swear to God, I think it was like 3 years ago, I just went to find the record stores and I sold all my albums.
Wow.
Just as again, I'm trying to just get rid of stuff,
In the right way without getting rid of it.
Oh yeah, right. No,
exactly.
just throw it. No,
So
never throw it in the trash.
What year would it have been when you realized, not only do I like rock and roll and I like records, but this stuff's happening around me? And, you're in the proximity of the big classic rock boom of Michigan.
Right. It was 15 through, and I left for California when I was 20. I came back once or twice. I ended up getting married when I was 23. So when I basically came back to California in 1973, I was kind of done. And it was very interesting during Carson's book about, I didn't realize it, but I knew I had to get out of the scene. And I can get into that because this boyfriend
We'll get into that a little bit later, right?
Later.
But first off, you grew up at again, a very cool time for teenagers because you see the growth of these teen clubs where you could get hundreds or in some cases even thousands of teens together to dance and socialize and enjoy music. What was the first teen club you experienced in the Flint area?
Oh yeah, definitely Mount Holly. And the friends that I introduced Gary to yesterday, they did some of the Flint scenes, and I was probably in some of those, but definitely Mount Holly was it for me. And I met Ted Nugent, the Blues Magoos, I remember seeing Question Mark and the Mysterian, Bobby Seger. There were occasionally Motown groups in there, but pretty much it was a lot of these Michigan guys we're talking about, and it was, I got their phone numbers.
Wow.
Magic.
Yes.
I have little pieces of paper that have Jeff Dagan, the Blues Magoo's drummer, his phone number, and then I have Ted Nugent's, and then I have Jeep Holland's.
Wow.
And it was
That's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame stuff.
Yeah, really.
Gary.
So these are autographs.
Yeah.
You need to add that to the collection.
And,
There we go.
I mean, they're little. Well, you saw the condition I sent those
Yeah.
other things. They're like scraps of paper,
Right.
When you
But
said
anyway.
Carson's book earlier, what's that book?
It's David A. Carson's Rock, Roll, and Revolution
That
History
one.
of Detroit music.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was telling Barbara what you had passed on to me, that Carson's book, as great as it is, was just a fraction of the research that he did, but he had so much that
He had
it
to
was
cut it down.
unpublishable.
Yeah, he had to color it down.
He had cut it down. It's still kind of like, I don't know, it's probably the best book on that.
I'll have to
particular
read it
period.
again. I
Yeah,
can't-
it is
I
fantastic.
can't.
Well, I access it a lot when I'm writing for my website, going back and because it was meticulously researched. He did a great job, and
Oh yeah. the
it
sources
covers
are
really from
fabulous.
the earliest rock and roll in Detroit, early
Yes.
50s, to about the time Motown leaves, and that's the period that he covers there. It's really, really
And you're
good book.
thinking somewhere there's a manuscript where he's got the complete book written.
Well, that's
some-
what Fred was saying.
Oh, wow.
And you had talked to Carson, or you talked to somebody who knew him?
I think somebody that knew him.
I remember hearing
Can't
about that
really
on one of our
remember.
other episodes.
Yeah, we
Okay.
probably accessed it a few times
Yeah,
just
yeah.
because he did such a good job. Well, Mount Holly was definitely the most famous of the Flint teen clubs. Now
it's
that
close
was
to Grand
like
Lake, too.
was that like a lodge, a ski lodge
It's
or
a
something?
ski lodge during the winter, very small hills, but Michigan doesn't have great skiing. It's
like Apple Mountain.
Yeah, not
But-
in southern Michigan,
But,
sure.
but
Yeah.
anyway, so, and then summertime, they turned it into a dance, and it was Bob Dell at WTAC.
See, right.
And again, this goes back to these friends that you met yesterday. Diana, would call up Bob Dell and talk to him, and she could do all kinds of voices, like you heard one of them yesterday. And she was she's just funny, And so he was very, he latched on to her right away, and he literally called her, or she would call him. And then when out at Mount Holly, she was literally hanging out in the booth with him all the time,
So she was the queen of Mount Holly, the
Apparently.
teen queen of Mount Holly.
Apparently.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fun.
yeah. So, and they were the ones that got us. I think they're the ones, I'm trying to remember, but I think she's how I got into that Who party.
Right.
And
Well,
it was
and it didn't even cost that much to go there, right? I mean, probably
Oh, I-
50
yeah, I
cents,
don't
50
remember.
cents or $1 or something
And
to
I
get
remember,
in.
and I don't
Yeah.
remember the artist, but it probably was, I don't remember who it is, but there was only one occasion, there was somebody there, and I'm trying to think it was the Who or what it was, I don't remember, but it was the only time, I mean, it was like packed sardine, you were climbing up the stairs and you were like this, but most of the time, with all of these bands, we all knew they were going to be something. There was a normal sized crowd. You didn't have to deal with, you weren't like a sardine in a can, It was really cool that way.
Was Sherwood Forest going on at the same time?
I think that was a little later.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I know a lot of people went to that, and for whatever reason, I didn't go there, and I
Me
don't know
neither.
why.
I never went.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
in Davison, which
Right,
isn't
right.
too far from.
No, it's not far from
Flint,
Grand Blanc. It's
yeah.
all those, all those little towns,
Right.
Davison, Mount Holly, Grand Blanc. They're all, 20 minutes here, there, and everywhere. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'm trying to think of the DJ, Peter C. Kavanaugh.
Oh, Kavanaugh.
Kind
Love
of
him.
what he was the big man at that particular venue, just like Bob Dell was at Mount Holly.
Oh, was he? See,
Yeah.
I didn't know that because
Yeah.
I connected with him later, and
Yeah, and they had some
Yeah.
real big concerts there.
Yeah, I mean, they
well,
were-
bigger than you could at Mount Holly because they could do it outdoors. And I'm
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
think they would call them Super Tuesdays or something like. I remember them being advertised on the
Right.
radio quite
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
And big lineups.
Yeah.
and-
Regrettably, I
yeah.
would have loved to be able to go there. I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't remember going there.
So that went into the 70s. Well, a lot of it probably happened when you were in California.
Probably. Yeah. If it happened later.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
What were clubs that you would travel to outside of your area?
You know, it was a lot of like state fairs and
How like would you come to Saginaw or go up north north, or what'd you do?
we did go to Saginaw, and I don't remember. See, I don't remember the clubs.
Well, what in Saginaw would have been Daniel's Den.
Oh, was that right? That was it. They
Or
mentioned, my girlfriends mentioned that
yeah,
yesterday.
two of
They
the
all
two of the
went
Saginaw DJs,
there. Right.
Bob Dyer and Dick Fabian, rented the YMCA in downtown Saginaw, and then they called it the Y-A-Go-Go, and they had some big names that came in there too.
Yeah.
Just like Daniel's Den did.
Yeah.
Not only did they have all the Michigan
Now,
groups, but national as well.
Did jeez, what's his name? I'll think of it in a minute. See, this is what happens when you get old.
Okay. Well, we'll just carry on,
Yeah.
and we'll come right back to it.
Yeah.
When did you meet Pete Andrews? And was there a picture of you with Pete Andrews that I saw on Facebook?
I cut out Diane. She was with him because Diane and Peter had this sort of thing. And so I thought, well, they're not going to know Diane, so I just cut the little thing.
So that was Diane. That wasn't
was
you.
Diane.
Okay,
Yeah,
because it
she-
wasn't identified.
No.
And I said, gee, that looks kind of like Barbara. I have to ask you about that.
No,
so.
it was,
right.
yeah.
So, Pete Andrews.
Yeah.
How did you meet him? Because at that time,
Mm-hmm.
he would have been the manager of the Scott Richard Case,
Right.
who were soon to change their name to SRC.
SRC, yeah. And again, it probably had to do with the connection to my sister. But again, because of Diane and Bob Dell and the whole, I'm not sure how we knew them, but I do remember going to the SRC house a number of times. And I remember Diane and Peter had a thing, and I'd be sitting in the living room kind of hanging out, and Gary Quackenbush and one of the Quackenbush brothers would be there, and they gave us like marijuana laced with hash, and I'm sitting there going, my head's just spinning, and I'm going, okay, I'm sitting here waiting for Diane, and Gary's sitting across from me, and okay, So at any rate, it just a number of times. And then I remember, I don't know what house it was, but they had a studio behind one of the houses, a recording studio.
That was at the SRC guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Morgan Sound, they called it.
Okay.
Yeah, that
And
was
that
out
was-
in the country.
Yeah,
that was off
That
of,
wasn't the same house, right? That was kind of like
They
a
moved,
farm.
I guess.
almost?
Well, by the time I moved to Ann Arbor, it was something else. It was like a beer making
Oh,
company.
All right.
Oh wow. Well, yeah, I know that I was in their house in town, but I also remember being in the studio because this my previous boyfriend, he knew them all. He knew all these people. He used to produce and manage groups. In fact, later on, he managed George Clinton's group and other groups. But he sat with me in the studio, and we were listening to, because Mitch Ryder had just put out a version of Blue Dress. No, what's that
Devil in
song?
a Blue Dress?
Devil with a Blue Dress or something. I don't know. It was a new recording. And so we were sitting there. I remember sitting there listening to it, and then anyway, so I remember that house. And
you dated the drummer for SRC too, right?
I did not.
Oh, you didn't.
What
Okay.
the story there? What my story is I we would see them because we would go see the Stooges or whatever, and they were frequently in the same bills and whatever, or these different venues, Mount Holly or Danielson or whatever. And so this boyfriend of mine, I left and I came to California. He called me up and said, this goes to SRC's Mod Clothing.
Okay.
So he called me up and said, I want you to go to London with me. And I said, okay. And they shipped me back to Michigan. We got on a flight to Detroit, and it was E.G. Is it E.G. Clausen?
Yes.
And his girlfriend and myself and my boyfriend, and we went to London with the sole purpose of we connected with some people. We connected, I remember, with Uriah Heep.
Oh.
I remember going over to their apartment, and everybody was sitting on the floor, and there was a table, and there was lines of cocaine. Lines of cocaine. And so I had my platform boots on that we had bought in London, because that was part of the reason we were there.
Yeah.
And I got up and I kicked the table with my, and I thought, oh no, what have I done? You know, and I was so embarrassed. And at that time in my life, I was kind of shy and insecure. And I literally walked out of the house. Here I am in the middle of London. I have no idea where I am, but I'm so embarrassed and I'm so upset. I'm going to walk out of the house. And then my boyfriend came after me and brought me back. But so anyway, to this trip in London, we're with E.G. and his girlfriend, and we're going around these different places and buying really cool mod clothes. And I remember we went to a bootmaker who made Jimi Hendrix boots. And so we had snakeskin platform boots made. So when we got to the airport, because we looked like hippies, you know, they wanted to take the heels off our boots because they thought there was
Smuggling.
But I will on the way to the trip in the Detroit airport, they gave me the cocaine. And I'm in the airport in the bathroom, and I went to open a case for something. I'm in a stall, and this cocaine falls on the floor. Not all of it, but I'm going, what do I do now? You know, and you know. So anyway, and so I collected what I could, not certainly off the floor, but it was like, and we got on the plane, and it was a chartered plane, and I remember everybody was partying, and our particular group was partying with what we had bought to the trip. So, but we were enjoying our trip in London and kind of being good guests. And when you come to somebody's house, you always bring something. So that's what we brought.
You brought from Detroit.
All the way from Detroit.
Amazing.
So anyway, it was an amazing trip. So, but that's kind of the fit in with the mod clothing thing in my experience.
Yeah. Well, they were SRC was famous.
Yeah.
For their stage wear. I mean, that was.
And I just read. I was on Facebook, and there was a picture, and I commented on the clothes because of what. And somebody said something about Steve Lyman's ex-wife or ex-girlfriend or something is the one who made those outfits that were in that shot. I don't know, because but
I don't know. We had Steve on. I don't remember.
He didn't say. I remember. I listened to it.
anything.
He didn't say anything about that, but that wasn't what you guys would be covering.
Well, I don't know. We might have. We might have touched on that fashion thing.
I think he stayed away from ex-wives.
Yeah, well, probably that. Yeah, we might not want to talk about that.
Yeah, there's not. Yeah.
So, did you see the Stooges perform very often?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot. Mount Holly. Different places, Grandy, saw them a lot.
Delta College?
I gave you that thing. Did you look at that thing I gave you last night?
No, I haven't looked at that at all.
No,
we were out on the golf course today.
No, I don't know. I don't remember if it was.
That's
Fred was there.
Oh.
He's in Rolling Stone.
my leg. Iggy picked up that girl. It was the dean's daughter. And they fell on my leg.
And Rolling Stone's got a...
So I could still picture it.
Yeah.
I could
he's been wanting to eBay his leg for a long time, but we haven't figured out how to do it yet.
But in Pete Andrews' book, he said that because he put on that show, and whoever the promoter or somebody from the Delta College went to Pete and said, "You got to get him. That's the dean's daughter." So he went up to Iggy and told him, and he gently put her down
on your leg.
Well, this was
Freddie.
I never interacted with Iggy, but I interacted with the Ashton brothers, and because my sister just had the suites for the drummer, and so I was with her. So we'd go somewhere, I'd be with her, and so she was with
Scott.
Yeah.
And I had to sit there with Ronnie and just kind of. It was just awkward.
Was Ronnie like digging you, or what's he doing? You were like, leave me alone?
I think all those guys just dug the opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And so they would make the most of them, and Ronnie attempted to make the most of, that opportunity.
It was pretty sad when he died
Oh, God.
because Scott Morgan told me that, and it was in the Ann Arbor paper, that somebody had broken into his house right after he died
Oh, really?
and stole his guitars and stuff.
Oh, really? Well, I read that he was living with his mom, I think, at the end. And I mean, I just remember he was kind of shyer than Scott, in my experience.
They also
And-
found a lot of Nazi material.
Oh, he was a big collector. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, he
gosh.
was?
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Well,
it's-
that's the other thing of like where, and like with Nugent and hearing that and that kind of thing. It's like, oh, ick. It's just, oh. I mean, as they're all young, and I get it. We're all experimenting. We're trying to find our way, or whatever. But Nugent's behavior and that hearing that about Ronnie, it's like, ooh, just that's my 2 cents.
Right,
There you go.
Get it.
So when was the last time you saw Pete Andrews? Because he just passed away here.
I saw that.
Yeah.
It was like the trifecta. It was Sinclair and Andrews, and I've forgotten who the third was.
Yeah. Wasn't too.
Oh, it was
Kramer.
MC5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wayne Kramer.
Wayne.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Here's an MC5 story.
I'm sure.
So my sister married Ron Cook, the guitarist that was in Mitch Ryder's band. For a
Yeah,
while.
Detroit.
Right. So, and my parents didn't like any of this musician stuff. I'll tell you later on. Lamarck Farner used to come to our house, and it was like, those long hairs. I don't want you hanging out with them. But anyway, point being that Sharp married Ron, and it didn't last very long. I don't remember, maybe 2 years, but they got married. They got married in Grand Blanc, and I don't know if they got married in the church or not. I don't know, because we were raised Catholic. But my mother had a reception at their home, and Tyner isn't Tyner. It's Tyner, yeah.
Yeah, Rob Tyner.
Yeah, it's with that. So Rob stood up for Ron at this
Really?
wedding. So he's at our house, and I have this picture somewhere. I wish I had it. It's because I was the maid of honor, right? So it's Tyner, me, Ronnie Cook, and Shar.
Oh, what a
And-
great shot.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
It's
If
really
you find
nice.
that,
If-
Put it up
make a
if I-
copy and send it to me.
Yeah, I'd love to find it. I don't know
Yes.
where it is, but yeah. So again, because the Grandy, a lot of times it was the Stooges, it was the MC5, and then whoever else, So, yeah. And
Yeah.
we were always just driving back and forth to Detroit or Ann Arbor, and
So you didn't see Pete Andrews in recent years at all then?
No.
That was back.
Yeah, no. Everything kind of stopped for me in this, realm about like when I went to California. Yeah, and just that's what I said about Carson's book. It was kind of like, wow, I felt that. I knew I had to get out of here,
Mhm.
and that scene. I just knew I had to get out. And I also happened to fall in love with a guy that was going to California. So it was one step after the other in Kismet and whatever.
Yeah,
But-
and they started to get into heroin too, which
Oh,
was like
God, I remember.
that kind of killed the Detroit music scene to
Oh
a
God, yeah.
a
No, I
great
remember.
degree.
It wasn't those groups, but Carolyn. Here's another story. I'll go back, but yeah, no, it was friends that we knew that were hanging out with the groups and stuff like that, and they were doing heroin.
Wow.
It was like, okay, we're not going anywhere near that stuff.
Now you had mentioned, because I was doing this story on the connection between SRC and the Who,
Oh,
that you thought it might have been either one of the Ashtons or Pete Andrews that got you into the infamous party at the Holiday Inn.
Right. And it might have been Bob Dell and Diana, or it might have been my sister, because I think, I don't know if the Stooges were there or not. I don't remember, but we were there, and I do remember it's interesting for me because I had met I had met Jeff, and I'm trying to think of how much time had elapsed, because I had met him out at Mount Holly, and I spent an evening with him, actually, and I love that guy. He was fabulous. But when I got to the party, he didn't seem to recognize me at all.
Really?
I mean,
How old
how
were you at
many
the time?
women do these guys run into, right? So
Yeah.
at any rate, point being that, so at that party, I don't know who got me in, but I do remember, I'm 17, right?
Right.
And I'm there and I'm going, oh my God. And then I do remember, and Carolyn was there. Did you? So Diana told a story yesterday that Keith Moon picked her up and literally hoisted her up over her shoulder. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah. And then Diane is looking for Carolyn. She doesn't know where she is. We're at this party with all kinds of crazy people. And so then Townsend tells her, don't worry, she's okay. And, it's just, I didn't remember any of that, but I do remember them throwing the cake,
Right.
and I do remember them being, just stoned. And I don't remember anything. And Peter Kavanaugh says that this thing about the car in the pool happened.
Right.
Some people you talk to, it did happen.
Well,
it did not happen. Some
Scott
people-
Richardson
Yeah.
claims that he was smoking a hash joint with Peter Townsend and they saw it happen.
See, there you go.
Oh,
So yeah.
Yeah.
So that's credibility.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, it sounds good to me.
But
You must have been in a room hiding away at the time.
I do remember, again, back to the Twiggy thing, the Gene Shunton thing, and the whole thing. I remember these gorgeous women walking in. I don't know if they were hookers. I don't know if they were girlfriends.
Groupies.
Whatever. But they were like stunning. And I'm this sweet little 17-year-old, and I was thinking, whoa, these are pretty cool. What scene's gonna go on here? But anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't remember leaving. I know that we must have left early because some of that stuff with the car and all that, I don't remember that.
Oh, you might have been gone by that time
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Who knows? Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So anyway, yeah.
And you showed me some pictures yesterday of Ted Nugent.
Yes.
And these were shot at Mount Holly, right?
Right.
So this had to be the Amboy Dukes,
Yes.
which I
yes.
still think is Nugent's best man by far of
Oh,
any of the
yes.
ones that he was in.
Definitely.
Yeah, I have two stories about Ted. And so we Rick Lober, I think his name is, was one of the band members in Amboy Dukes.
Right.
And he invited us all down to his home. He was living with his parents in Grosse Pointe. And I remember they had a maid or a housekeeper, and she was there, preparing meals and whatever. And so we walk in, and Rick is like 2 sheets, I don't know what he was using or doing or whatever, but, and then these crazy women that I was with yesterday were all hanging out with him. And this poor maid, she's looking at us, just rolling her eyes, going, just because she's observing these misbehaving teenagers,
Yeah.
right? And, and what's Rick doing there with dope and whatever. But and then the other thing about and again, like Ted Nugent gave me his phone number. So, it was like, okay. So I don't know if I gave him mine or what happened there, but he did tell me to come see him. So I drove all the way to their home in Ypsilanti where the band was. And now Carolyn says this, and I don't remember this, but I'm so naive, right? I get up there and the whole band's sitting around, but Ted's in the bedroom. And I remember going into the bedroom and then going, well, no, I don't think things are going to happen the way you think they're going to happen here. And I'm sorry. And I, was terribly embarrassed and hung out at the front of the house with some of the band members and then left. But Carolyn says that I told her that I showed up and there was another woman in the room with him, even though he asked me to come. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he asked me to get a beer for him, and I took the beer into the room with him and another woman. Now, I don't think so, but that's Carolyn's side of the story.
It sounded like Uncle Ted was maybe looking for a threesome there.
Okay, duh. I didn't even think of that.
When he told you to come, it wasn't with the beer.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
Thank you. Whoopsie.
don't think he's talking to you. Maybe it was her.
Now those shots that you had of Nugent,
Yes.
those were from Mount Holly?
Those
though?
are Mount Holly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My little, whatever those Kodak cameras were.
Yeah, they played in all the teen clubs.
Did you bring pictures with you?
Yeah.
Is that how you-
Yeah.
I've got some
Yeah,
pictures.
wonderful.
Yeah, I didn't bring
and
them with me, but
And
we can put some stuff up.
Good.
But there's not a lot of you, though, right? You didn't give me pictures.
no, there's nothing of me.
Yeah, see.
Yeah, no.
So
nothing
we
of
don't
me.
have any of
Yeah.
Barbara.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Yes, that's too bad
Yeah,
because
yeah.
well,
Yes.
you're a lovely woman now. I'm sure you were as a teenager as well.
Oh, little sweet, naive girl.
Well, there it is.
Yeah.
Now, you also told us that, and Fred and I were both at this concert, at the famous Rolling Stones concert
Yes.
at Olympia.
And I have another one I want to ask you about.
The 1969 tour.
Right.
First time they toured in, 3 years? They had gone through all the big drug bust
Oh, right.
in
right.
England.
Was that with Mick Taylor?
This was Mick Taylor
Yeah,
had
just-
just joined
just
the
joined
band, and the Stones always said that on that tour they didn't really get it together until they hit Detroit.
Wow.
Is that
So
right?
that was a great concert.
Interesting.
B.B. King opening.
Oh, I know.
Terry
I
Reid
was
I
so
also liked
thrilled
very
to
much.
see him.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
my.
it was a great show.
Yeah.
And then the Stones were just awesome.
Yeah.
What an atmosphere Olympia had! It was
Yeah.
unusual. I mean, there was
Yeah,
something
we
in
were
the air.
In the front row in the balcony.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was like right
Yeah,
there.
right.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
were very close to really
Yeah.
good seats, and
Well, this goes
yeah.
back to Mike Quattro because this friend of mine, was Quattro's nanny. And she would drive him all around. He had a limo. And she would drive him all around and whatever. And so the night of that concert, I came up to see him and I must have stayed with them at his home with her. But anyway, so he gave us tickets and we went to see them and we had back stage passes. And God, it must have been, I was 15, 16, something. No, wait a minute.
Well, it was
I'd be older than that. It was 69.
Yeah, it was 69.
So
yeah.
I was 19, yeah.
Yeah.
So, or 18, whatever the case may be. But at any rate, it was so cool because we were we were just roaming everywhere because we had these free passes. And just, we didn't really know anybody backstage or anything like that. But, we were all roaming around kind of Google-eyed looking at all these, people, like Stones and everybody else.
Yeah.
So that was very cool. And then that at the end of the evening, there was some after party that we were supposed to go to, but we were so exhausted because we'd been, walking around that huge stadium and hanging out there and everything. And I think we started to go and then we got lost and we gave up. We didn't go, which would have been another interesting story.
Oh,
I'm sure.
yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
No doubt.
yeah.
No guarantee the Stones were going to be there, but maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, right.
Some of them might have
yeah.
showed up. you
Right.
know.
I gotta see.
Keith Richards never went to sleep, so
No,
he
that's
would-
true. That's
Your
true.
parents were pretty cool letting you get out and do all this stuff at
Well,
that age.
it was
all these
interesting
ages.
because my father was rather authoritarian. God bless him. I loved him dearly, but they were not, so many of those guys, they wanted stability in their lives. They came home from that war and they wanted, have kids and have stability and whatever. And all of a sudden this rock and roll thing's happening, so they didn't like it, And so I remember Farner came over and Mom let Char know that, my sister know that, she didn't like it. And so can I go into some Farner stories?
Yeah.
Well, certainly. Now, this would have been when Mark Farner was with Terry Knight and the Pack. This would have been
The
earlier.
Pack. It had,
or
Pack.
Terry
Didn't I-
Knight had left.
Didn't I give you I think I gave you a small picture of Terry Knight in the Pack, and it they autographed it, and it was my sister's.
Yeah, but Terry Knight had left at this point, left the band to do his solo thing.
I think so.
Yeah, well,
just-
when they were called the Pack.
Right.
Yeah, that's
It was
where that Terry
yeah.
Knight had left. I think
Yeah.
that was
Well, this is all pretty
maybe
early.
67 or
So-
he was
60.
just left the Bossman then at that point, right?
Well,
Then he went to Terry Knight in fact.
he was in Terry Knight and the Pack, and then he left, joined the Bossmen briefly.
That's
Right.
the order. Okay.
Then when the Bossmen broke up, was it somebody, a guitarist, got drafted
What?
from Terry Knight and the Pack, and then Farner went
Oh,
in back
I'm
in the
not
band,
sure.
and he
I know
was
he
in
went
there
back in. right?
until Terry Knight left. and then Farner became the front guy,
Right.
the lead singer
Right.
of the pack.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyways, but he's a Flint guy, and he
is a Flint
yeah,
guy,
right.
and he knew this friend that I introduced to you yesterday, Carolyn, and the story is that Carolyn had blonde hair. She was bleach blonde back even in high school. Nobody did that, right? But she did that, and so he wanted blonde hair, and so he went to Carolyn's house, and Carolyn said, "Okay, I can do this." And she poured some, bleach or something on his head, and his hair just turned orange. And so I don't know how he dealt with that, but I do remember that story. Yeah, yeah.
I'll have to ask him that one.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
did Mark wasn't dating any of your friends or anything?
I think he was kind of interested in my sister.
Oh,
but
okay.
but she ended up going gaga over the drummer, Donnie
Brewer.
Brewer, right?
Okay.
Right.
The rivalry started
Your
way
sister
back
liked
when.
drummers.
Yes, she likes drummers.
She's a drummer lady.
Well, I mean, Scotty Ashen and the drummer those are good-looking guys. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
they are, so,
Isn't Mark Farner? I just saw an ad on Facebook. He's playing somewhere.
Well,
around Flint, you mean, or just?
Well, it's a benefit for.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think it.
Yeah, in fact,
His American band.
yeah,
or something
that's what he
it's
calls
called.
Mark
Yeah,
Farner and his American band.
yeah, no, I think Diane's both a couple years back there was a fundraiser in Flint or something, and he was in that, and they went to that, and they said, I don't know, I think Diane actually talked to him about coming up and seeing him, and they didn't do it, so, but I don't know, but yeah, they, God, they're just, Shar had it for the drummer,
Donnie
and Scotty, just, yeah. And then we would see them lots of places, and I remember when she was with the drummer for the pack, and Terry was in it. So I these timelines with when they left and whatever, And again, it's kind of like me sitting in the SRC house with Gary. I'm sitting there, and Terry's sitting over there, and I'm like 15, and I'm going, okay, I gotta sit in the living room while my sister's having a thing with her boyfriend, and Terry and I's just sitting here, and
Right.
I was so shy. I didn't know how to engage people, and he wasn't. I don't know. He didn't hit on me, so I was grateful for that, because I don't know what I would have done with that.
That's right.
Yeah, but I do remember my father saying he had a cousin who had this was way after it had the pack is gone and everything, after Terry, I guess, just got involved in drugs or something. But he said that Terry was renting an apartment from one of his properties, and this was in let's say in the 80s.
Okay, after the Grand Funk thing was
right.
long gone.
And he had made the movie. He had made a movie track called The Incident. He made a movie for this movie called The Incident, and I don't know what. But anyway, he just said he was a big druggie. He's just.
Yeah, I think there was the cocaine.
Then he
thing
moved
was
to
going
Texas
on.
after that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
he was even more serious than that. It was
Right.
like we're talking about, shooting stuff up and that kind of stuff. But I don't know. But I wouldn't have been a bit surprised, because that's kind of what came into the whole scene.
Yeah, well, he looked terrible when they did the VH1 Behind the Music episode on Grand Funk Railroad. And boy, Terry Knight. I mean, when he was with Terry Knight and the Pack, he was kind of like a rock star.
Oh, totally.
And this guy, wow, he just looked like a burnout gangster.
Really?
He looked terrible.
That's too bad, because he was
Absolutely.
another really good-looking guy.
Yeah, exactly. I just, you wouldn't have recognized him if you didn't know it was Terry Knight.
Yeah.
He just looked totally different.
Yeah. He got to start as a DJ at WTAC.
Yeah. He was very successful
actually,
DJ.
His name was Terry Knapp
Right.
at the time.
Yeah.
And he used to be the DJ out to the Golden Globe for the dances.
There you go.
Wow.
And he had a Corvette, and he was like a teenager still.
He was a
And
rock
we were
star
all
even
going,
then.
whoa,
Yeah.
look at this guy, man. He's got a Corvette.
Yeah.
Well, he always had that element of style about him, and I
Oh,
think
totally.
it really helped him be successful in the world of rock.
Right.
That goes a long way.
Right.
You
And
know.
I mean, he was a good, I think he knew how to pitch things,
All
right?
right,
I
and
mean,
he was a terrific frontman.
Yeah.
For Terry Knight and the Pack.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't a great singer,
Right.
but he was a great
A
frontman.
performer.
He just looked the part.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And he had a great band behind him. He was smart
Yeah.
enough to have a terrific band behind him.
Right.
Wasn't he the 6th Rolling Stone or something?
Yes, that was one of his big promotions. And of course,
I didn't remember that. What
Well-
was that about?
he got a hold of the test pressing
Oh.
of the next Stone single,
Oh.
which was a kind of a ballad called Lady Jane.
Oh, yeah.
In advance, the Stones hadn't released it yet,
Uh-huh.
and he got a hold of it, and he brought the Pack in, and they recorded it
Oh.
and put it out. And I can remember it on the radio. They were promoting it, the new single written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, from the 6 Rolling Stone, Terry Knight. And so the Stones, of course, as soon as they found out about it, they put it into that immediately.
Yeah, right.
But he had so much publicity from that. I mean, wow, it was just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a publicity gold mine. And you can get it when any of the, the CD compilations
Yeah.
of Terry Knight and the Pack, it always says Lady Jane on it.
Yep.
And they really did a very good version of it. Every bit as good as the Rolling Stones version.
Well,
So,
that's the thing with all these bands. They're so good.
yeah.
And it was that whole distribution, whatever, not working, whatever, right?
Well, yeah, he
Yeah.
was recording on Lucky 11. I mean, that's a Flint label.
But for him to get that promo probably came through the record company that he knew somebody of.
He knew somebody
and it
at
snuck it into his hands, and he's like,
Yeah.
bing, bing, lights go off.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
isn't out yet. Let's go back.
he knew somebody in the Stones camp. He had, I think, promoted some of their concerts.
Yeah.
I know they opened for the Yardbirds when they toured in Flint, and he had a lot of connections. So somehow he got a hold of it, and
Right.
It's kind of like Hendrix when he got the
was a
test
bold
pressing
move,
of
though.
Sgt. Pepper. He was playing it that day in the studio when it came in. He goes, "Hey, I could play it." They learned it that night. They went and played it in New York, and the Beatles were like, "We haven't even put that out yet."
Yeah,
But
whoa.
he had a test pressing of it. So Hendrix was doing his own version already on tour. It's pretty good legend story.
well, it is.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He didn't put it out on a record.
no.
Right.
That's kind of like a line that you don't cross,
Right,
Well, you think so.
unless you're Terry Knight.
Yeah. Right.
Of course, he screwed Grand Funk Railroad out of millions of dollars.
Well,
so
that's,
yeah.
He ended up getting killed in Texas.
Right.
defending his daughter from
Right.
her abusive boyfriend, and
Right.
he ended up getting
It's just
killed.
weird. It's so sad.
Yeah. So when you went to California, you were really, into the music scene in Michigan in a major, major way.
Right.
Did you continue to enjoy music in California like that? Go to concerts?
I had a hard time letting it go, and I'd see these groups, like Alice Cooper came out, and I've got a story about Alice Cooper, and that man, and it would be like, God, I want to go to this, and my husband at the time, who was a wonderful man, but he wasn't into that scene, so it was kind of like, well, I'll take you to see Linda Ronstadt, like, okay, so that was kind of like
Trade off.
the trade-off.
You're more into the softer California style rock then, rather than the raucous
Right.
Motor City.
Okay. Yeah, no.
Shoot,
bad
that,
boy
would have
thing.
Yeah.
that would have been when Fanny played with Barbra Streisand in the early 70s. She did 2 rock records and she tried to keep up with Fanny, and she had them back then. I had those are
Whoa.
cool records. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that when she
Who?
did Stony Inn?
Barbra
And-
Streisand?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that
Yeah.
was Fanny playing.
Yep.
Well, that had, I don't know if Nancy Quattro eventually joined Fanny, right, for a time?
Later.
Yeah, well, it
this
wasn't at
this
that
would have been the
point. Okay.
Fanny coming out of.
Because that would have been a little bit of Detroit connection.
yeah,
there.
yeah.
I didn't follow the Pleasure Seekers or Susie or whatever, but I know Diane because of Mike, being Michael's nanny. She's still friends with, I want to say Patty.
Patty's
Quattro.
still quite out there.
Yeah.
Patty does a lot of the Fanny
Oh yeah, maybe
promo right
it
now,
was
so,
Patty, not
yeah.
Nancy, right?
Patty,
that
yeah,
was in
yeah.
Fanny,
Yeah.
right?
She was a vocalist after they went through their second or third incarnation there towards mid 70s.
Yeah.
I love Fanny.
I didn't. I think the Pleasure Seekers kind of played in the hideout clubs. But after that, I don't know if they really did the teen club scene. They became more like a show band kind of thing, that wouldn't have really fit into the Grandy. That's when they went to Cradle and kind of transitioned to
And where was Cradle?
Well, Cradle was, it still had Susie in it. And the younger sister,
okay. It was the group.
It was kind of like what
Okay.
happened to the Pleasure Seekers. A couple of the original members dropped out. A couple of the older Quattro sister played. I think it was Arlene that played keyboard. She was no longer there.
Okay.
And then they had Cradle, which was a 4-person all-girl band. Do you remember, Fred?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they didn't record anything, but Susie got an offer to go to London. With Mick and work with Mickey Most.
Yeah.
So she left Cradle, and
Sounds like it was a great decision.
it was, but
Yeah.
it
Ruined all that.
really caused a rift
Yeah.
between her and her family, including her parents,
Oh.
because they felt that what she did basically ruined it for
The rest of them.
the rest of the girls.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was Susie kind of talked about it in that documentary that played at Hell's Half Mile a few years ago. Did you get to see
I
that?
didn't see that
It was
yet.
really a good documentary. Excellently done. And I thought maybe that might generate some interest from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for her, but it didn't really happen. But yeah, she was very frank about talking about that. I think
The
it's
effects
still a
of that
little.
decision.
Still, the relationship is not maybe completely healed
Wow.
between her and her sister.
Wow.
There seemed to be a lot of resentment.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Long time to hold a grudge.
Yeah, a long time. You got to learn to let things go.
Yeah, definitely.
Susie still does it though. She's still out there doing promo and stuff. She did she did some video for the Dick Wagner tribute things, and when I was working with Wagner in 2001, 2002. I was there for 3 years anyway, 1 through 3, I should say. I brought my Les Paul and Soldano amp that were my first 2 big purchases, and into the studio because I wanted to fart around. And I came back from work one day because I always went to the studio after I worked all day. And Dick's recorded a track, and he's got my Les Paul and a Soldano. I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Cutting a track for Susie. We're going to see what comes out."
Wow.
And he did it all week long. I don't know if it ever came out, but
Okay.
I was
Well, the last thing I saw, we were talking about Mark Farner. She and Farner had done a duet at some benefit. I don't know, was it a tribute to Dick Wagner or? You
Might have
remember
been.
that?
No.
You didn't? I think
Wow.
I will have to look that up on. It probably is on YouTube, I would think. But
Probably.
they did a duet together.
Yeah, that's a group I never, and everybody raves about the Frost, and I mean, I know the Frost, I know, who's the, I think it's the Craig
Frost.
Frost,
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
Craig
went from
Frost.
there to
Yeah.
the Seger's band later on.
Yeah, and I knew his younger brother, and I probably met Craig,
But Craig was in Grand Funk. He wasn't in the Frost. So yeah,
well, wait a minute,
Craig Frost was his name.
right, but, okay, he went with Bobby Seger.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
he
sorry,
eventually
sorry, right.
was Seger after
Right.
Grand Funk.
Yeah.
Right,
after Grand Funk,
you're
yep.
right, okay, got it, separated the two, yeah.
But the Frost, Bossman, Frost,
Bossman.
Dick Wagner, Ursa
Right.
Major. You
Dick
have any
Wagner.
Ursa Major stories?
No.
Because that's the bass player from Amboy Dukes went with Dick into that band, and
What's his name?
Greg Arama,
Arama, yep.
and then they
Yes,
formed.
I remember that name. Yeah,
I
yeah.
say if you knew that band, that was Greg, and he went with Dick in that.
Okay.
And it was a fantastic record they recorded. But when they were doing their demos in New York, before Greg got called to join them, I think it was right around he got Dick was not sure what he wanted to do, but Billy Joel was on keyboards, and he was going to be at the 4th member, and then they opted not to
Whoa.
do it. Yeah, and that would have been Ursa Major with Billy Joel, Dick Wagner, Greg Arma, and the I can't remember who the drummer was, but. I'm always looking for Ursa Major stories because they're the few and far between. It was probably one of the best records he ever did, and first one with Bob Ezrin that kick-started the whole Steve Hunter, Dick Wagner thing, and that whole.
I don't know how
story.
much they played in Michigan, though.
I don't know either, but
I don't know if they even did play in Michigan. It just didn't seem like it lasted very long. They put the album out, and then it didn't really sell that
mean,
much.
Ursa?
And that was
You mean- is that
Ursa
what
Major.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
bass player, Greg, ended up leaving or getting cut at some point from the band. I don't remember, but Grant West went and played bass for their last tour. And he still lives down near Detroit. He's been up here a few times for some Wagner events, and great guy. But he was the second bass player they had, and they never did any recording with him. Anyway, I was just curious if you had heard some
Yeah,
movie stories.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
always digging it.
you mentioned that you had an Alice Cooper story, and was this Alice Cooper when they came to Michigan, like in about 1970
they had
or
the house
so?
out in Ypsilanti or wherever it was.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
So I met Michael Bruce, who's a guitar player for him, probably at Holly. And again, he said, come on to the house and we'll hang out. And I said, okay, cool. So my parents, God bless them, they were going to go see my dad's cousin in Jackson. So I get up with them at like 10 in the morning and they drive me to the house. and I'm there all day, and it's totally just really cool, innocent, hanging out with Michael Bruce, and it was the night of the Aurora Borealis, and so we lay down on the ground out there, and we're just absorbing all that wonderfulness, and it was really wonderful. And I remember Alice coming outside, and I want to say he was talking like to Mike, and he wasn't really clear on stuff, but it was kind of something about him breaking up with a girlfriend and that he was going to have to pay her like a monthly stipend, like an alimony thing, whatever. and he mentioned them, and maybe I'm really just don't remember, but I swear to God, he said $3,000 a month, and I went, in 1970 something, $3,000 a month. Whoa.
I wouldn't even think those guys would have made $3,000 a month as a band at that point.
But
Right.
Exactly. So that's probably incorrect, but I do know he came out and he said something about breaking up with this woman. He was going to have to pay alimony or some version of whatever. But so then, like at 10:30 at night, my parents come, knock on the door, pick me up, and I go home.
Wow.
And it was like, are you kidding me?
Right. That's so
probably happened about the time that they appeared at Rollaire, because that was during the summertime.
Rollaire.
Yeah, that was the big outdoor. It was an outdoor skating rink, but it was a big teen gathering place. It was
Okay.
kind of like a teen club, but it was a roller rink, and
Okay,
so it was
yeah,
only
yeah.
active during summertime. But they would have 2,000 kids there for battles of the bands,
Cool.
and they started having these big concerts where they would bring in, Dick Wagner and the Frost, Bob Seger, the MC5, Amboy Dukes, Rationals, you name it. And in this one particular case, Alice Cooper, the band, had just come back to Michigan from California,
Right.
thinking that, maybe they might be more successful in the, that hard rock market that was kind of booming in Detroit at that time. And somebody dropped out of a concert at
I
Rollaire,
remember that.
and they
Hearing
brought
about that.
Alice. Yeah, they brought
Yes, I
Alice
do
Cooper
remember hearing
in.
about that.
Their name wasn't on the poster or anything like
Yeah.
that, but they were there at the time that the Bay City Times photographer was there.
Good
And
timing.
Mike, you had put the
Yeah, that was
picture
funny.
up in that article of Alice, and that's the one we've got on the wall there, along with another one where they transposed a close-up of his face
Yes,
over the
I
crowd.
remember. Yeah.
But
yeah.
that was at that particular event, and that was probably the very same summer
No,
that
Did they
did that.
had they recorded their two Zappa albums before that? Pretty's
Yes.
with You and Preach
Right,
for You, and
but they hadn't
Killers,
sold.
I think, or something. Like
They
that.
hadn't sold at all.
Okay, not Killers, but the
Yeah,
one for-
so they weren't really, nothing was happening
Yeah.
for them in California.
so they came back.
They came to Michigan, and then, I think it was 8 months later, they got with Bob Ezrin,
Yeah.
and he kind of harnessed their sound into.
Killers or Love It to Death. one of
Well,
them
yeah,
ones,
well, it was "Love It to Death,"
Yeah.
and "I'm 18."
Yeah.
Of course, that's the song that broke
Yeah,
him.
that's right.
Broke him
right.
big.
so cool.
Right.
Yeah,
And Bob Ezrin was already in town producing Detroit, the record with Steve
Right.
Hunter at the time. That's how Wagner came across all that when he ran into Hunter down in Florida. while he was putting Ursa Major together.
And that's still a pretty darn good album, that Detroit album.
Records. Oh my
and
gosh.
again, even with that song "Rock and Roll," which was kind of a radio hit,
Lou
it just
Reed
didn't do anything.
No, that whole album. Top
Mitch
to
Ryder
bottom.
doing the lead vocals. Come on,
it's crazy good, crazy good record.
Yeah.
Well, I remember Mitch came out years, like, I don't know, must have been the 80s or something. It's some venue in the city, and he was by himself, and I went to hear him, and I mean, his voice was just gone. And maybe he's kind of done some work now, but it was just like, whoa, this is not the Mitch Ryder I remember, and I don't know where he is with, but.
Well, he's a big star in Germany.
I read that.
Still is.
Gigantic. Yeah.
So,
and he had that little bit of a comeback with John Mellencamp, too.
Yes, Mellencamp.
Right.
He produced the
yeah,
Prince
yeah.
song, When You Were Mine.
Yeah.
But his last probably 9-10 albums have been in Germany.
Well, I'm glad for him.
How's he sound nowadays?
Well, you remember that? This was that
Well, I don't know
famous
real recent.
photo
but
of him. This is the Roll Air stage.
3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah.
I had
Wow.
booked a tour for King Ernest, a blues guy, and the gig in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, I have one
The gig in
Mitch Ryder
Detroit,
story.
Okay. We'll get to
Okay.
that.
there weren't
Mitch
that
Ryder
many
story.
people there, but Mitch Ryder came with a buddy, and he got up and sang.
It sounded good.
Sounded great.
That's awesome.
Good.
Well, I'm glad he's.
What year was this?
Well, now it's probably
kinda
been,
got a
I'd
record
say
right
10
now. Be
years
careful with
ago.
that.
10 years ago. Okay, so 2000.
But I read his book,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I think he pretty much screwed himself. I mean, he says it in the book.
He kind of does say that, even in what's his name's book?
Carson's book?
Yeah, Carson's book. Kinda
Yeah.
says that.
Well, he got
and then there were
involved with.
just so many other
yeah.
things to not make the Michigan scene.
He made
work.
so many wrong decisions.
Well,
he said.
a lot, yeah, but a lot of it had to do with Bob Crew,
Oh
who
yeah.
he was under contract to,
Right.
and it was Crew that ended up getting rid of the Detroit Wheels. Number
Right,
one,
and then
horrible
making
mistake.
Him go,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then
that was
fronting like a soul band or
Right,
something like
right,
that, and it
right.
just wasn't
Did
right.
you hear
know?
those records? I just recently put one on about a month ago.
Did you?
Yeah, because I'm like, what did he do after Detroit? I
Right.
never really, and now it's all on streaming.
Well,
and
this
it was
would have
horrible.
been this was
Before.
before Detroit, though.
Right.
Oh, that
This
way
was
too. Okay.
before Detroit.
Detroit
Then he
Well, he
came
did
back
like
and-
What Now, My Love. I think that was that period
Okay, maybe
where he was doing songs under Crew's direction.
Okay.
He had a real hard time getting rid of Crew. And then Detroit was another attempt
Maybe
to
that
do
was
something.
before that, and I wasn't real aware.
Yeah, it was after.
Okay.
But there was, from what I
Detroit
understand,
record.
talking to some guys that were in Detroit, there was a tremendous amount of drug use in that band,
Oh gosh, yes.
and that's
That's-
kind of what
Ronnie
took it
Cook
down.
Was,
Yeah,
did it-
Ron Cook was in that band.
In
Yes,
that band.
right.
Yeah, and yeah, they were all like, phew.
Yeah,
I had a buddy tell me a story that he lived down in Detroit in a cul-de-sac area or something, and Mitch lived at the end of it. And Mitch would cut everybody's lawn in the or come down and cut an old lady's lawn for her.
Really?
Yeah, he'd be like, "Oh, Mitch is out today. There he is cutting his lawn." All of a sudden, come over, and some
that's
elderly
lovely.
lady he cut her lawn for too. I'm like, what a cool little story I heard. down
yeah. He seemed like a real nice guy. I met him when he played at was at Vets Park. And really a hot day. He came off. He was just wringing wet with sweat. And I talked to him for a while in the tent. And I think I didn't have much to give him at that point. I was with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But I did have one of my rock and roll pins that I presented to Mitch. But yeah, he was nice to talk to. And he was kind enough to mention the Hall of Fame in his book. So
Nice.
I haven't read that. That's good.
Little
I got to check that
promotion.
out.
Yeah, he's pretty open about the sexuality thing too in his book,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of surprising. Much like Dick Wagner,
Yeah.
who always seemed like kind of a straight arrow to me. And then holy mackerel.
Now you know him as Blueberry Pie Guy.
Wow, jeez, Dick.
Well, okay, fill me. Are we talking
Fill me in, you said?
Are we talking bisexual? What are we talking here?
Well, in Mitch Ryder's case, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But Dick, I think he was talking about having a sexual addiction
Oh.
and heavy into cocaine.
Oh yeah. Well, speaking of that, that's my story about Mitch, is that this boyfriend of mine, record producer, manager, always seemed to be able to have whatever drug supply you wanted, or he knew where to get it. And Mitch called him up. This is like, I want to say 68, 67, maybe 69. And he was in an apartment, and he wanted cocaine. So my friend had it or knew where to get it. Literally at midnight, we're driving over to his condo. Here it is, babe.
And you were with him on the delivery?
I was with him.
Wow.
We were there. And it was like,
Was that
so
one of your
that's
drugs
maybe
of
one of
choice
those
back
mistakes you're talking about.
Did you enjoy the cocaine back then?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's
Yeah.
part of why I left.
Yeah.
It was like, I just, that whole scene with this wonderful boyfriend and all of this stuff going on, and I thought if I stay here, I'm going to be dead.
Wow, that's amazing to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I was 20-something years old, and I was trying to finish college and stuff, and I thought, I loved being with this guy, and I loved all of the craziness and whatever, but you talk about bisexuality. We went to a party, and there was a guy there, and my friend knew him really well, and I thought, and it was like, and that guy ended up dying from Quaaludes. And he was just flaming. He would just be what he wanted to be. And this is like 70.
Yeah. Totally out of the norm.
It's totally out of the norm. And my friend was they were good friends. And the other thing I thought, okay, am I with somebody who's a bisexual, and can I handle that?
Yeah.
And I didn't, I'm like 19, right? And I didn't know. And so all of those things are swimming around in my head. And I met this other guy, and he was straight, and he was a professor, and it was like, this is the,
Immediately had your out right there.
So the joke is, Diana Couch sang at my wedding, my first wedding. My wonderful second husband is here, and he loves me, and he tolerates these stories, so I must apologize to him, because they're all these old stories. Men don't talk about their old girlfriends. Women talk about them. But anyway, point being that, so I chose for this, and we got married in a church, I chose Stairway to Heaven for my wedding song in a Catholic church. So Diana Couch and her husband at the time sang that song, and it was, for me, in my head, it was that girl Barbara, she used to be searching for the gold, and I got to go the different path, because this world of gold out there is pretty scary.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah.
why I left.
Yeah, it's probably a good move.
And we end that part 1 of 2 with Barbara Bacon here in the MMHP in the 989. And we want to thank Barbara for sharing these stories, the musicians, the viewpoint from a 17-year-old that got to see everything from being the fly on the wall at all these concerts and backstage and trips, and having the older siblings, and the drugs, the sex, the advantage of being young and getting to witness things where you're not quite able to handle it, but at the same time you know what's going on. And Barbara has shared so much with us. We have a part 2 coming up here in 2 weeks. And this is not like any other MMHP episode you've ever heard, but it's all the backstories from that fly on the wall, the Michigan music, as the rock history happened in the 60s into the 70s. And we want to thank Barbara Bacon for all of her contributions, and not just to this podcast, but to the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame for some of the artifacts she brought today in this episode, which you can now see down there. Some of the photos which will be on our YouTube. So join us back in 2 weeks for part 2 and all those juicy stories with the one and only Miss Barbara Bacon.
On behalf of our hosts, this podcast wouldn't be here without generosity of the Bay City Historical Museum, which hosts the Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame. We'd also like to thank all of our guests, and especially to the listeners. The MMHP is found at 989.network, or where all podcasts can be found. You can find updated information as well as Dr. J and Sir Fred's Picks of the Week on Facebook. Also on Facebook, check out Mr. Mike's Local Music Live series and Scott's Mid-Mitten 15 from Harvest Canteen Studios, featuring one-on-one interviews with Michigan music artists. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, and Mr. Mike on YouTube as Mr. BT1. That's MRBTEE and the number 1.
On behalf of us hosts, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr.